Yes! You know what's the worst bit about doing some of these bits when you're on your own? You've got no one to celebrate with.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.
Hi and welcome back to the channel, and this is the last stages of working on this Kawasaki Ninja powered track car. I've had this for a few months. I've had so much fun working on it. I've had to learn everything from scratch. There's been a load of wiring issues. We've had to make modifications to the body. It's just been a real learning curve, but it's nearly at the point that I'm going to be giving it back and it's going to go off and get tested. Now, obviously, one of the problems we've got is because it's not road legal, we can't just take it out and start driving down the road. But my friend is ready to take the car off somewhere so we can test it, and that will be happening in the next week or two. We've got another couple of cars lined up for the channel which I really want to move on to. So in this last episode on the Fury, we are going to sort out the electrics, a few bits and pieces of the body, and of course get the engine running. Thank you so much for watching the channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get these last bits and pieces done. So as you can see, the cables are still a little bit messy. Obviously it makes a lot of sense to me. I've been through it 1,000 times, but we are now going to choose where the buttons go for the final time, which means we can shorten cables, we can reduce a load of this sort of mess in here and tidy up a few of the little things left over from when the loom was sort of originally brought in with the car. So what we need to do is start unclipping all of these. We're going to take a load of pictures just to make sure that we know where everything goes, but I'm very clear with it all. And then we're going to start using this template, marking on it for any of the bits that need adjusting, and then that can be used for the next piece. And we're going to use some material that's a little bit thicker, just so we don't have any play in it. If you've watched the channel before, you'll have seen me do this a few times. Basically, what we're now going to do is take the dashboard out, which is actually a stencil, and then we're going to be making a whole new one on a thicker piece of wood. So I've got to start by drawing all my templates out, making sure I've got everything aligned correctly, ready to start cutting and fitting all the parts in the position they're finally going to go in. It's a bit of a laborious process, but I find it really therapeutic, because actually what I'm going to end up with is something that is custom made, one of a kind, and I can stand back and just enjoy the fact that I've finished it to a really nice high standard. Right, as I said, it's going to look a little bit rough at the moment because obviously part of the ply is kind of like peels at the edges and bits and pieces, but it doesn't matter because it's nice, it's strong, it can actually withstand, you know, moisture really well as well. I've used this for years, and now we can actually wrap it. So we need to go and get the material. We need some spray mount, and it's not like spray mount that you use for card. It's like proper adhesive, and we need to wrap this so that we can actually start getting the parts in. Some of them we have to do on the car because that's where they are. Others we can actually do up here like these. So, but let's get this looking the part first of all. So we need something to put down so we don't get muck everywhere, and then we'll go from there. Now the material I'm using is actually a really nice material that's normally used for lining the back of commercial vehicles. It's very simple to work with. It stretches in all directions and is very forgiving and hard wearing. A few minutes later. Right, that should be okay to go on now. So we're now going to try and do it. Where have I put my gloves? I don't need my gloves, I'll be fine. So we're now going to try and pick it up, put it on top of here, and then obviously it's going to start sticking quite quickly, so we want to make sure that we're pulling it and smoothing it out. So, as I said, the material is really forgiving, but if you can get it down right the first time, it means you don't have to peel it back and get dry glue under it and start disrupting the surface from being perfectly flat. You can then trim it, and then it's time to fold it back in on itself. Let's get plenty of glue on there. And then when we're going over and we're going to go anywhere near a hole, we're just going to trim little bits out so that we don't go over the top of ourselves and then we start sticking the inner face to the outer face through the hole, because it just becomes a nightmare. So that, again, got to wait another couple of minutes. So we're going to wait till now and we can start putting this in place. And as I said, we've got the tape here. We want to be able to wrap around the corners. It's one of these fiddly things you just have to kind of practice and do a few times. But basically, we want to be able to go around this rounded corner, and to do that, you have to be able to get the material to go over itself. You can trim it back afterwards, but what we want at the moment is to be able to pull this all the way along so it's a nice tight edge. I've always found using gaffer tape on the back of it to hold it in place makes life so much easier. You're not worried about how it's going to look at the end because no one's going to see it, but it really does make life a lot simpler. And that is what it's going to look like. Obviously this is the back side, so it's not particularly pretty obviously, but remove some of the dust, some of the little bits of, some tiny little bits of glue, and it's hard to have a garage without splinters of wood everywhere, but that's our dashboard, which I think looks pretty good. Now we've got to make the access points for putting all the parts through. So we are going to try and minimize getting this grubby again. This is my favorite part, adding the switches and all the bits and pieces that make it start looking like a dashboard. I've done this so many times and I still enjoy the process so much. Okay, so just gonna put this in kind of temporarily and just rest it in place. But I think that looks pretty good. Right, so now the dashboard is done, we're gonna make a few more modifications to the car to make it a little bit easier to look after moving forward. One of the big changes I made was to the electrical system at the front here, tidied it up, and what we have to do to make life easier moving forward, like these side panels down here, on both sides, which are now riv nuts, so they've got 6mm bolts in them and we can actually remove them really easily, is we need to make an access hatch on the front of here so that should we have any electrical issues, we can get through without having to take the whole body off. Now at the moment, the way I've made this dashboard is it sits in place, it's bolted in, and you really don't want to be messing around with that, especially if it's something simple like a loose cable. So if we can make a hatch in the front of here, about where the steering column goes through, we're obviously going to have to make a plate over it that we can bolt on afterwards, probably in 2 pieces that can be easily removed. But it means that should we have any issues, we lift up the bonnet, we can go in through into the main tub and we can fix anything by just going in really easily. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to cut this out without compromising the integrity of the shell. So let's do that. It's really important when you make modifications like this that you properly think about what it's going to do to the integrity of the shell. You really don't want to cause any problems that are going to come back to haunt you later. I am exhausted, but that is our access hull, which is going to need a plate over it now to reinforce it. It's actually quite strong, but you can see I've cut through here. This cut here is so we can put the whole body over the car without taking out the steering column, which is a big deal because it's difficult to get to the bolts. It just makes life a lot easier, but that is going to get bolted to the chassis. So there's not going to be any movement in there once it's on the car. Just gotta hope it doesn't flex too much when we're lifting it and put it on the car. So let's do that now. Looks like that's a perfect fit, so now we need to do some other fixes. Right, so as you can probably see, the tub is off, but basically there's a few little issues with it. It's not in bad condition. There are a few spider cracks and bits and pieces. The main bit is, if you can see just between where the wheel arch is, I'm trying to point to the right direction. There we go. So where the wheel arches are on each side, or where the cutaways are for the tyres to go, this is probably the thinnest part of the bodywork. It's not reinforced. It's really weak. And when you lift it off, even with 2 people, it flexes. And I want to make sure there's no risk of that cracking when the car's going down the road and it's vibrating, all the rest of it. Plus we've made some cuts at the front so that we can actually drop the body on and leave all the electrics and leave the steering rack in place. So what we've got to do now is we've got to make the cuts to the bodywork to get it to match up with what's on the car, with the side sills, so we can get to the bolts for the roll cage, and then we need to do some reinforcing. And this is very long, very boring. I'm gonna swap over to the GoPro and do it on a time lapse, but I need to get this done so I can get it back on the car. So let's get on to that. This is a job I've done multiple times over the years. It's really, really important to make sure that the fiberglass tub is strong and certainly can withstand the modifications that you're making. Reinforcement isn't that difficult and it's very, very valuable long term. Okay, so that's basically it. You can kind of see in the background there's some patches and bits and pieces, so I'm just going to show you up close. Right, so here we've got a patch over the wheel arch to give it an extra thickness and stiffness. I fixed a few bits around where this moulding is, where it was starting to fracture, mainly on the other side, but you don't want to be too careful. So like over here, this was actually where that you can see the yellow Kevlar, it was actually pulling away. So that's why it's clamped in place to make sure that it's all properly bonded. And again, we've done the wheel arch, so that'll be nice and strong now. So I'm gonna let this go off and then we can get the body back on the car. We've cut out some bits and pieces, so it's gonna sit much better over the roll cage and the new dashboard. And move on to whatever's next. Right, so that's the dashboard done, the modifications to the body, the strengthening, cutting into the bulkhead to give us access, and now it's just getting the engine running. Well, that should be easy, shouldn't it? Right, I finally got an opportunity to get the car up and running. I've got a couple of little bits and pieces to do. We haven't got the water tank on at the moment, so I need to put the header tank on so that the system's got water in it to keep the engine cool, obviously. A couple of little bits that I did off camera. They were a bit fiddly and I couldn't get the camera down. And anyway, so we've got a new fuel pump in here. There is a bit of a problem. You might be able to see from there that the rubber that holds the fuel pump in place, when we did the video a few months back and we got it running for the first time, we were doing it in the dark, we couldn't get the old fuel pump off and we had to cut the rubber mount. We assumed that when you bought a new fuel pump, the new rubber mount came with it, and it didn't. So we've got to resolve that, but for the time, that will be absolutely fine. We've wired in the fuel pump. We've got a hose here that we're going to run to a fuel can, just with a little bit of petrol in it. But I need to get the tank on to make sure the water system's flooded, so we don't risk overheating the engine. So I'm going to do that now, and then we're going to try and start it. Yes! And it revved so much better than before. So I'm not going to take the carbs apart. You know what's the worst bit about doing some of these bits when you're on your own? You've got no one to celebrate with. Right, so we know that it started, we know it wanted a rev, and that's far better than we ever got out of it when we had it last time. And I think it may have been, could have been old fuel, it was still gunked up. It was still, it could have been wet from where it had been outside. So I think maybe being dry in here for a couple of months has helped it out. But I think, yeah, we should be able to give that one more go. And then we need to get the fuel pump going so it's actually getting a proper fuel feed. Whoa! that you may have got that on the video, it made me jump. Okay, so it's a loud engine anyway. I didn't know how loud the exhaust was on this. It's actually pretty ferocious, so there's probably a bit there where I actually jumped back because it caught me off guard. And you don't know if you're going to get pop back as well. I've got the airflow going through here as well, so it's drawing everything out. But you don't know if all of this easy start, it could, potentially sort of like pop back, and you want to be careful with stuff like that. And I've had it before with carburetors. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the easy start away. I'm going to get the fuel tank hooked up, and we'll see if we can get it running. Right, I'm going to save you a lot of time. Basically what's happened is there was still muck inside the carburetors or the fuel lines or something, and I've got to take them apart. It's just one of those infuriating things that you have to do. So I'm taking them off, but I'm not going to be doing them outside. It is far too cold. Right, I can't promise I'm not going to get in trouble for making the whole house smell of petrol, but it is too cold to be outside at the moment. And considering I've got to do this methodically, and basically make annotations so I know exactly how to put it back together again, I'd much rather just do it inside this evening. So I'm not going to take it too far, but I'm going to have a good look round, open up the bowls, and then we'll go from there. We'll see how bad this is inside. So let's get started. I suppose I need to know which tools I'm going to need. Okay, so this is all new to me. I've not worked on motorbike carburetors before. I have worked on carbs, but it's quite a limited area for me. I haven't done a huge amount of it. However, I'm starting to wrap my head around it, and I think I know what everything does. I just need to start cleaning it through and then deciding whether or not it's going to have to go and get an ultrasonic bath. Right, I think we're done. I've been through all of the carbs, cleaned out the jets to the best of my ability with the limited tools I've got here, having never been prepped for doing this before. It all looks pretty good. All the floats move fine. All the jets seem clean. Well, they do now anyway. There was a few little bits of grit in there, but nothing I thought was particularly serious that would stop the engine running. So, time to get it back on the car and yeah, give it a whirl. Let's see what happens. Right, I've put the cars back together. I've got a 10-minute window where I can try and get them started. So it was off camera, but basically I popped the cars back on. I haven't put the Jubilee clips on to hold them in place, but they are on pretty well. Should be enough to run it up. I put the throttle cable back on as well, so that's connected up to the pedal so I can grab it from there. And I'm now going to try and run some fuel into it, and we'll see if we can get it running. Really, really exciting. So yeah, let's get this done. Right, so that's where we've got to. Unfortunately, the carbs are going to need an ultrasonic clean, but the engine does run. It sounds absolutely amazing. And apart from that, just getting the carbs clean through and any of the nasties out of it, it's basically ready to test. So I've spoken to my buddy, he's ready to collect it. We're going to get those cleaned properly this week. And then hopefully the next video, which might be a couple of weeks away, will be us showing you the car out being tested and run up and foot to the floor ideally. Anyway, I'm gonna show you the interior quickly. This is how it came out when the tub went back on it. I'm really, really pleased with the finish. The inside is amazing. Yeah, it needs a bit of a clean, but as I said, for a car that is being literally just tested to get ready for going out on the track, this is where it needed to get to. All the electrics work, everything's nice and clean, and you can see from this box over here, that is what I cut out of the loom. This was unnecessary wiring, and we've ended up with something nice and clean with a handful of cables in there, and everything's labeled. So if there is a problem, we can find it. Thank you so much for watching. It's been such a fun build, and I've got 2 cars coming onto the channel at the same time. I'm really excited to show them to you. So have a great week, and I'll see you really soon. Cheers, bye.